Hola, mi gente. First English episode of my new podcast. So, the goal is to explain the why and to convince you to listen to the podcast. There are a lot of podcasts out there. There are a lot of podcasts out there, and you have choices. But the goal for me is to tell my story, which matters, and to tell you why it matters, and to tell you why um, it says a lot about Africa, the African experience in America, the African experience in Europe, the African experience in the world in 2025 and beyond. So, Miante, there's a lot to say, and we are just starting. But I should tell you more about who am I. My name is Christelle Nadia Fotso. Um, I was born in Cameroon a long time ago, and I have a disability. I wasn't born disabled, but I have a disability since I was 1 month old, and that changed my life because in Africa, in Cameroon, I will try not to presume that the Cameroonian experience is the same everywhere in Africa. So I'm very, very mindful of not always thinking that Cameroon is Africa and that all African countries are the same. I'm very, very mindful of that. Africa is a continent, not a country. And we're very, very different people. Africans and people who have in common Africa are different. They're like all people over the world. They believe different things. They may have some common past, more or less in common, but the way they feel about it, the way they interpret it is very, very different. So my dad, Victor Fotso, Fotso Victor, was one of the wealthiest people in Cameroon at the time, and one of the first industrialists in Central and Francophone Africa. So yeah, I was born in that environment where my dad, because in his village, when you're wealthy, more likely than not, you marry um, multiple wives. So yeah, so born into a wealthy family, I become disabled at 1 month old, and that changes the course of my life. I'm not one of my dad's first kid. My dad already had kids, and he was already old. I've never seen my dad young. That matters, mi gente, because it shows you that I'm born in a very, very hostile environment. Disability in Cameroon comes with a lot of prejudices. It's a curse. Somebody did something to you. Uh, anyway, it comes with a burden. When you're in a wealthy family and you're born disabled, what people usually do is that they hide the disabled child because it comes with shame, you know, because they have an image to preserve. They don't want to be associated with disability. So I was basically that kid, the kid that um, people felt that my dad should hide, that he should be ashamed of, and in a way, that was his curse, a child that he may have sold to become wealthy or to keep being wealthy. So I was that child. My dad, because despite the fact that he can't read, he can't write, he doesn't even speak French very well, but he's wealthy. And that shows you that at his time, because he was born around 1926, um, Cameroonian societies and African societies, even before um, the colonization, had an education system. So my dad, despite the fact that he couldn't read or write or speak French, had the know-how to become very, very wealthy. So his experience makes it possible for him to have another way of seeing my disability. So, in spite of all the, the bullshit, excuse my French, that comes with my disability, my dad, because, he has it in him, um, protects me. He never sees me um, as something other than a special kid, you know, and he's very, very open. He's very, very loving, even more loving, I believe. That's my belief, that he's with his other kids. He's very, very mindful. He knows the society in which I am born very, very well. He knows that if he doesn't show that he loves me, that my life is going to be difficult. He knows my life is going to be difficult nevertheless, but he chooses to show that for him, I am a blessed kid. I am a gifted kid. So me as a, very, very young, I'm very much aware of that, of my environment, because there the way people look at you, that the whispers, there's a whispering campaign. I was born within a whispering campaign. I was born with I grew much aware of what was being said about my disability, of the fact that people felt that it was a sign that I was cursed, of the fact that people didn't believe I could do anything, of the fact that the woman who gave birth to me felt that I was her cross, So a lot was done to try to correct the disability, to try to see if there was something that they could be done in France at the time. I went to Paris at the time, and to all I had all type of surgeries to try to fix the disability, but it never worked. It actually made it worse because I was too young. So anyway, I grew up. I grew up in that environment where I realized that the only way for me to survive, the only way for me to make it, was to be bright and to do well at school. So I decided to be very, very good at school, to be a great student, and I was a great student. So, Bert, at the end of the 70s, I go to Paris, come back to Cameroon, bright student, public schools. Then I decide, because things are not going very well. My parents divorced when I was about 7, and the woman who gave birth to me has trouble with the disability, trouble with the divorce. She's a diplomat, so it's very, very challenging for her, and she's not able to deal with me. So I write a letter to my dad, and I say to him that things are not going well, and that he's no longer really there, and that the only way for me to have a normal life, to have a chance of a normal life, is to come to America. Is to come to America. So when he receives a letter that he can't read, but people read it for him, he asked me to come to see him. I remember I was 13, and we go to his, we are in his office, and he tells me, what can I do? He's trying to do everything that he can to convince me to go to France or to Switzerland instead of America. And I tell him, no, the only way for me to have a chance with this disability, which is very, very severe, is to go to America. So he says to me, okay, go to America during the summer holiday and find a school and come back. We'll talk about it. He was basically still trying to make me change my mind. So I go to New York with my the woman who gave birth to me and her other kids. And when we come back, we find a school which is in upstate New York. And when I come back, and he says, "Are you sure? why are you going that far? If you get sick, if something happens, it's not. Paris is 6 hours from Yaoundé, which is like the capital of Cameroon. If you go to New York, it's like we have to, somebody has to take two planes, two flights to get to New York. It's too far. And I'm like, no, I'm not changing my mind. I'm going. So he lets me go. So I go to New York and I go to this private school, prep school, which is a girls' school, very, very conservative girls' school. So is my experience. I will take, the time to tell you more about that. Went to that private school. It didn't work out. Ended up going to Northfield, Mount Hermon, which is Massachusetts, which where I did 2 years and I graduated. Then went to college at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Did a bachelor in political science and in philosophy with a minor in economics. Then I went to the Washington College of Law of American University, where I had an Inter-American University, where I had my Juris Doctor and my master's in international relations. Then I got into the District of Columbia. I got into the District of Columbia um, Bar Association, where I'm still a member. Yeah. So that's my story. After that, United Nations, because of, the woman who gave to birth to me is a diplomat. So did the United Nations thing for a while, and writing has always been a passion of mine. So that's my background. Um, I've always been different. Disability, even in America, was a huge factor. But I was a beneficiary of the Americans with Disability Act, because throughout my school experience, people had to made adjustments to make sure that I had to give me a chance to provide accommodation within, of course, reason. I never had to ask for it. People had to do that. It's like it came with the Americans with Disability Act. So that's the background, guys. That's the background. Um, After I turned 30, I finally decided, after I wrote my first book, I should say, which is the name is it's a book in French. The name of the book is L'empreinte des choses brisées. Um, you can see it here. Yeah, after that, I finally decided to get the amputation. I started in New York with an operation of my hip, because I had no hip, which I did in New York Presbyterian Hospital of Columbia University. Then I had to go to Belgium. Very, very long story. Very, very complicated story. Um, that's the background. That's the background. And the reason of this podcast is that with my dad, tragic death at the American hospital in Paris, with everything that has happened since, with the fact that there is an unwillingness to look at my dad's story and to look at my story and to realize that they matter, and that those type of tragedies, those type of injustices matter. Um, you know, my dad became wealthy beyond his expectations. He could no longer, it was impossible to just do things in Cameroon or to just do things in Africa. As all wealthy people at that time, he invested in France, the former colonial power, and he invested in Switzerland. And it backfired. Even though he died in France in suspicious circumstances because he had to be entangled with the um, political power in Cameroon and became a political person. It made all of this very, very, very messy. Very, very messy. And mi gente, the reason of this podcast is that I refuse to accept that what happened to my dad, what happened to me, our stories do not matter. I refuse to accept that tragedies, injustices are normal for African people and that it's possible for the media, not only in Cameroon and in Africa, but elsewhere, for the justice system, not only in Cameroon, in Africa, but elsewhere, to just say it's too complicated. It is normal African savagery. I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that people can't make my dad responsible for his own tragedy, for his own rape. I refuse to accept that because I was born disabled in Cameroon, because I come from a family where there are too many people, too many wives, too many kids, that what has happened to me is normal. I refuse to accept that even though Cameroonian officials, even though the Cameroon government, even though in France, there has been a lot of complicity, that none of this matter. I refuse to accept that even though Switzerland is choosing to make this a Cameroon matter, even though his money is still in Switzerland, that I should just accept that and basically say, this is Africa. We are Cameroonians. We are Africans. So I shouldn't bother people with this story. I should basically just get over it and move on in my life because nobody cares. I refuse to accept that because this is about African money, dirty money, money that smells bad, money that is, of course, always dirty. I should just accept and basically say, okay, let me look elsewhere and move on. I refuse to accept that my experience, my story, my relationship with my dad doesn't matter. I refuse to accept that savagery is acceptable when it comes to Africans. And that because I was sometimes held by some people, I should just shut up and accept the fact that I'm powerless and that none of this matter. So my podcast is to tell this African story, others' African story, talk about things with my point of view and show that it is relevant. It is a fight for justice. It is a fight for my rights. It is a fight to make sure that never again people will just do the unspeakable and think that because it is Africa and Africans, they can get away with it. Miente, to put it simply, I can't just say African lives matter. Because I believe that even in Africa, individuals matter. What each African lives, what each African experiences matter. So yes, not only does disability matter, but Fotso matters. So Niente, the goal is to tell the story, to have impact, and to make sure that at last people address what I'm saying and can't just hide behind my Africanness and my disability to say, it doesn't matter. We don't care. There are too many injustices in the world. We don't have to care about this one. Or it's too complicated. We're going to make it uncomplicated. I have been for most of my life inaudible, invisible. So in this podcast, not only will I share my dad's stories, which is an incredible story, I will share my story. I will do a commentary on what is happening in the world in 2025, and I hope beyond. Most important thing that I want to do with this podcast is to make sure that people know that things have changed. That when they do things like what has been done to Victor Fotso Victor, and to his disabled daughter, his physically challenged daughter, people are not just going to look away and say, this is Africa, this is normal, this is banal, this is acceptable. People are going to ask questions, and there will be consequences. I want this podcast to be consequential. And I want you guys to be curious enough to want to know more and to ask questions. And yes, to use a word that is not very, very popular, expression, it's not very, very popular, but to make noise. So that's the end of the first podcast in English. We will do episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, because in French, the podcast is every Monday and Friday. I hope you liked it. You can write to me at contact at Fotso, my name, FOTSO.org. It's written right here. And yeah, subscribe. Thank you guys. See you Thursday.